Most poker pros dream of making it to the top, but what happens when they get there and then decide to walk away? Some left after reaching the absolute peak, cashing out while they were still ahead. Others quit because they couldn't keep up, the game evolving faster than they could adjust. And then there are the ones who didn't leave on their own terms. Scandals, burnouts, bad decisions, some exits were inevitable. But here's the real question: do poker players ever really quit? Or is the game too addictive, too relentless, too much a part of them to stay gone forever? The truth behind why these pros walked away is deeper than you think, and by the end of this video, you'll know who left for good and who might be plotting their return. Poker isn't just a game, it's an obsession, a way of life, and for most professionals, it's nearly impossible to walk away from. Some poker pros quit loudly, making sure the world knows they're done. Phil Gordon, he slipped away so quietly that most people didn't even notice. During the height of the poker boom, Gordon was everywhere. He was a respected pro, a World Poker Tour champion, an author of multiple poker books, and a key figure in poker media. If you watched poker on TV in the 2000s, you saw Phil Gordon. Whether it was commentating on Celebrity Poker Showdown, hosting ESPN's Poker Edge podcast, or breaking down hands with the analytical precision of someone who'd already made his millions before ever playing a hand of poker, he was a mainstay. And then, nothing. No dramatic farewell, no retirement tour, just silence. Maybe that's because poker was never his end goal. Gordon had already made his fortune in the tech industry before becoming a pro, and poker was just another challenge to solve. He did, to the tune of nearly $3 million in live tournament winnings, including a 4th place finish in the World Series of Poker main event and a WPT title in 2004. But after Black Friday shut down online poker in the US, many players had to rethink their careers. Gordon didn't need to. Instead of trying to navigate a post-Black Friday poker world, he turned his attention back to business. He founded Chatbox, an AI-driven messaging company, and from that moment on, poker seemed like an afterthought. No appearances at major events, no deep runs in high-stakes tournaments, just the occasional blog post hinting that maybe, just maybe, he still had an eye on the game. But here's the real mystery. How does someone so deeply embedded in the game just disappear? He wasn't broke. He wasn't scandalized. He didn't flame out in a spectacular downswing. He simply moved on. Or did he? Gordon once wrote that, despite being retired from playing, he still had plenty to contribute to the game. He even toyed with the idea of starting a poker podcast again. But a decade later, his name has faded into obscurity. Unlike most poker pros who quit, there's no sign of a comeback. Maybe that's the difference between Gordon and the rest. He wasn't in it for the rush. He was in it for the challenge, and once he solved poker, he had no reason to keep playing. But in a world where so many players just can't stay away, Gordon might be the rare exception, the one poker pro who actually quit. Tony G was never one to do things by halves. A charismatic figure during the poker boom, he made his mark with razor-sharp table talk and the kind of banter that could rile even the most stoic opponents. With live tournament winnings tallying up to over $6 million, he wasn't just a spectator at the game. He was a central player, but then, in a twist that could only be described as uniquely Tony G, he swapped the neon glow of the poker tables for the polished halls of the European Parliament. Yes, you heard that right. Leaving behind a career built on high-stakes risk and high-octane trash talk, he embraced a life of politics. His departure wasn't due to a dramatic burnout or a scandal, it was a deliberate pivot into a completely different arena. Yet, even as he traded chips for legislation, Tony G couldn't entirely resist the lure of the game. The man who once made opponents squirm with every witty remark found himself drawn back to the felt. In 2017 and 2018, his tournament cashes reappeared like subtle reminders that the thrill of poker was still very much alive. It was as if the game was calling him back, whispering that no matter how far you stray, the allure of the gamble never truly fades. Even now, as he juggles business ventures, like his partnership on a blockchain fitness app with none other than Mark Cuban and his political commitments, Tony G embodies the contradiction of a man who left the game, only to have it leave an indelible mark on him. Did he really quit, or was it just another calculated play in his long career? With Tony G, the lines are always blurred, and every exit seems to be just a pause before the next hand is dealt. If you were to picture the quintessential old-school gambler, it would probably look a lot like Sammy Farha. Cigar in hand, effortless swagger, the kind of guy who made poker feel like a game for the fearless. He was a relic of the high-stakes, Vegas-era poker scene, a player who thrived on instincts and bravado rather than solver-approved strategies. And yet, despite playing one of the most famous hands in poker history, his 2003 World Series of Poker heads-up duel against Chris Moneymaker, Farha didn't capitalize on the poker boom the way so many others did. He had everything: the image, the results, and a game that could have made him a staple of poker's golden era. But instead of chasing sponsorship deals and grinding out TV appearances like many of his peers, Farha did something few expected. He disappeared. While other pros cashed in on the newfound popularity of poker, Farha was rarely seen outside of the occasional high-stakes cash game. He didn't need the limelight, and maybe that was the difference. Where others saw a business opportunity, Farha saw a game, and when the game changed, he simply walked away. His last recorded tournament cash came in 2014, a far cry from his early days as a consistent final table threat. Theories about why he stepped back range from frustration with the evolution of the game, where instinct was being replaced by mathematics, to the simple fact that he never needed poker the way others did. For all the players who talk about quitting and can't resist a comeback, Farha might be one of the only ones who truly left the game behind. No desperate attempts to reclaim past glory, no flashy return to the high-stakes scene, just a quiet exit from a world he once ruled. Of course, the best gamblers never reveal all their cards, so if he ever decides to return, it will be on his terms, when the action is just right. Mark Voss played poker like he was in a heist movie: get in, make a quick profit, and disappear before anyone could adjust. Known for his short stack hit-and-run strategy, Voss had an uncanny ability to buy in for the minimum, double up fast, and leave before the game turned against him. It frustrated opponents, but it worked. He won millions doing it. For a while, Voss was one of the rising stars in poker. He won a World Series of Poker bracelet in 2006, taking down a $2,000 no-limit hold'em event for over $800,000. He was also a full-tilt poker pro during the height of the online boom, playing against the biggest names in high-stakes cash games. And then, in 2011, he disappeared. Voss's exit was abrupt, a complete withdrawal from the poker world. His last recorded tournament cash came that same year, and after that, silence. There were rumors, of course. Some said he simply got bored of the game, that poker wasn't challenging enough anymore. Others speculated that after making millions, he had no real reason to keep playing. He never seemed to chase the limelight like many of his peers. He played, he won, and when he was done, he left. The closest thing to an explanation came years later when Voss resurfaced briefly on poker forums, mentioning he had moved on to business and investing. It made sense. Poker was always a means to an end for him, a tool to build wealth rather than a lifelong pursuit. But here's the question: could someone like Voss stay away forever? His ability to capitalize on edge cases and exploit small advantages made him one of the most frustrating players to play against. And while he may have traded the poker tables for a more traditional business career, the instincts that made him dangerous at the felt don't just disappear. So did Mark Voss really quit poker? Or is he just waiting for the right moment to take another calculated shot? Most poker players struggle to quit. Haseeb Qureshi didn't just leave the game, he erased himself from it. At one point, Qureshi was among the most respected minds in online poker. A high-stakes grinder, a coach, and a full-tilt poker pro, he seemed destined for a long career at the top. Then, in 2011, his name became tied to one of the strangest scandals in online poker history. It started with the infamous Jose Macedo scandal, where Qureshi and several other players were linked to an online poker cheating ring. While Qureshi himself wasn't accused of direct cheating, he admitted to helping cover up a $100,000 ghosting scam. The fallout was swift. He lost his sponsorship, his reputation took a massive hit, and just like that, his poker career was over. Most players in his position would fight for redemption, grind their way back, prove they belonged. Qureshi did the opposite. He disappeared from the poker world entirely and reinvented himself. And he didn't just leave, he made sure there was no way back. He donated nearly all his poker earnings, over $500,000, to charity, keeping only enough to start a new life. Then he set off on a bizarre journey of self-discovery, traveling the world, working on farms, taking vows of silence, and teaching English to refugees. Eventually, Qureshi resurfaced as a writer and entrepreneur. He published a book, How to Be a Poker Player, The Philosophy of Poker, which wasn't a traditional strategy guide but a deep dive into the psychology of the game. From there, he transitioned into the world of cryptocurrency, co-founding a hedge fund and becoming a major figure in the tech space. Poker is full of dramatic exits, but Qureshi's was different. He didn't just leave, he purged poker from his life, rejecting the very thing that made him rich. So did he quit? Technically, yes. But in reality, poker seems to have shaped the way he sees the world, and that's something you can never walk away from. Most poker players dream of winning a tournament that cements their name in the history books. Alex Jacob did that in 2006 when he won the $10,000 US Poker Championship for nearly $900,000. It was the kind of breakthrough score that launches a career. Except, instead of doubling down on poker, Jacob slowly started fading from the scene. For a while, he was considered one of the most promising young talents in the game. A Yale graduate with degrees in economics and mathematics, he approached poker with the kind of analytical mindset that seemed built for long-term success. He racked up over $2.6 million in live tournament winnings, final tabled major events, and was seen as part of the new wave of poker talent. But then, in 2012, he stopped playing. Jacob didn't quit gambling entirely though. He simply took his skills to a different kind of high-stakes environment, Jeopardy! In 2015, he dominated the game show, using an aggressive strategy similar to the way he played poker. He wasn't just winning, he was crushing. He went on a 6-game win streak, earning over $150,000, and then returned later that year to win the Jeopardy! Tournament of Champions for another $250,000. His run wasn't just impressive, it was memorable. His strategy of buzzing in quickly and betting fearlessly threw off opponents who weren't used to that level of aggression. Even host Alex Trebek called him one of the most dominant players in Jeopardy! History. By then, it was clear. Jacob wasn't coming back to poker. He had found something else. Something just as competitive, just as rewarding, but without the brutal variance and emotional toll that poker demands. Today, he works in financial markets, still analyzing risk and reward, but instead of facing down bluffs at the poker table, he's making real-world bets in the economy. So, did Alex Jacob really quit poker? Absolutely. But did he quit competition? Not a chance. He just found a game where the edges don't disappear, the swings are smaller, and most importantly, he always gets paid. Most poker players who quit leave the door open for a return. Annie Duke, she slammed it shut, locked it, and then set the whole thing on fire. For a while, Duke was one of the most recognizable names in poker. She had the results: a World Series of Poker bracelet in 2004, over $4 million in live tournament winnings, and a win at the NBC National Heads Up Championship in 2010. She had the connections. Her brother is Howard Lederer, one of the key figures behind Full Tilt Poker, and she had the image, a female poker pro, thriving in a game dominated by men, building a brand as one of the top women in poker history. Then everything unraveled. First, there was Ultimate Bet, one of the biggest online poker scandals of all time. While Duke wasn't directly involved in the super user cheating fiasco, she was a spokesperson for the company, defending it even as players were scammed out of tens of millions of dollars. Then came the Epic Poker League, her attempt to create an exclusive, invitation-only league for elite poker players. On paper, it sounded great. A poker tour where players didn't just compete for prize money, but also earned equity in a league-wide championship system. In reality, it was a disaster. The league lasted less than a year before filing for bankruptcy, leaving unpaid debts and unfulfilled promises. Duke, who had positioned herself as the face of the league, took the bulk of the criticism. Poker players don't forget, and they definitely don't forgive. After the fallout, Duke did something that few people in her position have ever done. She left poker entirely. No half-hearted comebacks, no redemption arc, no return to high-stakes cash games. She walked away from the game that made her famous and reinvented herself as a corporate strategist. Now, instead of coaching poker players, she teaches business executives how to make better decisions. She even wrote a book called Thinking in Bets, Making Smarter Decisions When You Don't Have All the Facts, which basically applies poker logic to real-world problems without ever mentioning the parts of poker she'd rather forget. The poker world hasn't exactly welcomed her back. To many, Duke is synonymous with failure and deception, a player who made millions off the game and then abandoned it when things got tough. So, did she really quit poker? Yes. But was it by choice? That's a tougher question. Because in poker, your reputation is everything, and once it's gone, there's no buy-in big enough to get it back. Doug Polk's retirement from poker was about as convincing as a Phil Hellmuth promise to stop whining at the table. It sounded final. It looked final. But was it ever really going to last? For years, Polk was one of the most dominant figures in poker, particularly in the world of heads-up no-limit hold'em. He crushed online high-stakes games, won 3 World Series of Poker bracelets, and took down the $111,000 high roller for one drop for $3.7 million, his biggest live score. But Polk wasn't just a player, he was a personality. His poker YouTube channel exploded in popularity, mixing high-level strategy with sarcasm, dry humor, and a relentless takedown of anyone he thought was bad for the game. Whether he was calling out bad plays, questionable ethics, or just roasting Phil Hellmuth for the millionth time, he became the go-to poker content creator. Then, in 2018, he announced he was done. His reasoning? He wasn't enjoying poker anymore. The game had become a grind, and Polk had always been more of a competitor than a lifer. Once the challenge was gone, so was his motivation. Instead of battling solvers and facing endless variants, he turned his attention to cryptocurrency investments, business ventures, and even stand-up comedy. For a while, it looked like he had truly left. He stopped playing, stopped creating poker content, and shifted his focus to building his personal brand outside of the game. But poker has a funny way of pulling people back in. It started small, an occasional tweet, a reaction video here and there. Then came the big one, his heads-up grudge match against Daniel Negreanu in 2020. Polk had spent years mocking Negreanu, and when the opportunity arose to settle it on the felt, he couldn't resist. Over the course of 25,000 hands, Polk demolished Negreanu, winning over $1 million in the process. And just like that, retirement was over. Since then, Polk has opened the Lodge Card Club, a massive poker room in Texas, and returned to making poker content full-time. He still claims he's not a poker pro anymore, but let's be real, he never really left. Doug Polk didn't retire from poker, he just needed a break. And if history has taught us anything, it's that when the right stakes and the right storyline come along, Polk will always find his way back to the table. Some poker players quit because they're broke. Some quit because they can't keep up. Vanessa Selbst, she quit while sitting at the top of the mountain. With nearly $12 million in live tournament earnings, Selbst was the most successful female player in poker history. She had 3 World Series of poker bracelets, multiple high roller wins, and a reputation as one of the most aggressive, fearless competitors the game had ever seen. Her opponents weren't just beaten, they were dismantled, outplayed, and left wondering what had just happened. And then, in 2018, she walked away. Selbst announced she was retiring from poker, leaving behind her PokerStars sponsorship and transitioning into a new career, working for a hedge fund. It made sense. A Yale-educated lawyer, she had never intended poker to be a lifelong pursuit. The swings, the constant travel, the pressure, it all started to feel more like a grind than a game. And as edges in poker got smaller and solvers reshaped strategy, Selbst saw the writing on the wall. But there was a catch. For years, she had been outspoken about players who left poker for finance, criticizing the move as selling out to capitalism. Now, she was making the exact same transition. In her retirement announcement, she acknowledged the irony, admitting she had once judged people for the same decision she was now making. But here's the thing, poker doesn't let go that easily. Despite leaving full-time play behind, Selbst found herself drawn back in. The game still called to her, and in 2019, just 1 year after announcing her retirement, she final tabled a high roller event at the PCA, finishing 3rd for over $300,000. Then, in 2023, she made another return, this time playing the World Series of Poker main event. Retirement? Not quite. Selbst may have walked away from the grind, but she never truly left poker. The game still runs in her veins, and when the right spot presents itself, she'll take it. Because poker isn't just something you quit, it's something that stays with you. Poker has a way of pulling people back in. Some players leave quietly, some exit in disgrace, and a rare few actually manage to stay gone. But for most, the game is always there, lurking in the background, waiting for the right moment to call them back. Maybe it's the competition, maybe it's the money, or maybe it's just the fact that once you've played at the highest level, nothing else quite compares. But what about the players who didn't get to walk away on their own terms? The ones who didn't just quit poker, but fell from it? Few risers were as fast or as spectacularly doomed as Jamie Gold's. He went from winning the biggest main event prize in history to struggling to prove he even belonged at the table. So what really happened? Click here to find out.